Until you, the first agorist in a phase 0 situation, have added to your number, your only strategy can be to increase your numbers, as well as to live counter-economically yourself. The best form of organization is a libertarian alliance in which you steer the members from political activity where they have blindly gone seeking relief from oppression, and focus on education, publicity, recruitment, and perhaps some anti-political campaigning, i.e., vote for nobody, none of the above, boycott the ballot, don't vote, it only encourages them, etc., in order to publicize the libertarian alternative. A libertarian alliance may take stands on issues agreed upon, but insist on unanimity. Only the most clearly libertarian stands will be taken, and you can always veto a deviationist stance. Always encourage tendencies toward hardcore, that is, consistent positions, and scorn softcore, inconsistent ones. Phase 1. Low-density agorist society. The first counter-economic libertarians appear in this phase, and the first serious splits in the libertarian movement occur. Since few libertarians are very consistent yet, deviationism will run rife and tend to overwhelm activism. Get liberty quick schemes from anarcho-Zionism, running away to a promised land of liberty, to political opportunism will seduce the impatient and sway the incompletely informed. All will fail if for no other reason that liberty grows individual by individual. Mass conversion is impossible. There is one exception: radicalization by statist attack against a collective. Even so, it requires entrepreneurs of liberty to have sufficiently informed the persecuted collective so that they laze coherently libertarianward rather than scatter randomly or, worse, flow into out-of-power statism. These crises of statism are spontaneous and predictable, but cannot be caused by moral, consistent libertarians. The strategy of the first new libertarians is to combat anti-principles which strengthen the state and dissipate anarchist energy uselessly. The general strategy outlined previously applies. Get libertarians into counter-economics and get the most active of the agorists to get counter-economists into libertarianism. The proto-new libertarians may work within existing organizations and clubs of libertarians as radical caucuses, ginger groups, or as a libertarian left faction in general. A new libertarian alliance is premature here because it is not yet self-sustaining. What can be successfully built is, under whatever label seems most conducive for recruitment, a movement of the libertarian left. Such a movement is itself a mixed bag of individuals of varying hardness of core, but they are tending or moving towards the ideal of new libertarianism. Even within the movement of the libertarian left, structure should be de-emphasized. The most new libertarian will be the most competent to coordinate and plan. Those of the highest understanding and practice of agorism and the greatest zeal for action will naturally direct resources. Each member of the movement of the libertarian left, like each new libertarian ally, spends his or her own resources and decides whether or not to accept a tactician or strategist's advice and planning, as any entrepreneur would do with any informed consultant. Some pseudo-political public trappings may be necessary to utilize public forums and media access. Also, most people will not understand your market organization unless you translate it into pseudo-political terminology and back again. At this point, in the latter stages of Phase 1 and with a functioning movement of the libertarian left large enough, these hardcore dedicated cadre can apply leverage to sway larger groups of semi-converted quasi-libertarians to actually block marginal actions by the state. This is a high-expenditure, quick gain, but low, long-range yield tactic, and it should be rare. It will be covered later. Basically, stave off war and mass extermination of libertarians. Following all of these activities, radicalizing the libertarians and evolving the new libertarian alliance, that is all one can accomplish. Phase 2. Mid-density, small condensation agorist society. At this point, the statists take notice of agorism. While before, libertarians could be manipulated by one ruling class faction to the detriment of another, a sort of anti-market competition played with ballots and bullets rather than innovation and pricing, they will start to be perceived instead as a threat. Pogroms, mass arrests, may even occur, although that is unlikely. Remember, most agorists are embedded in the rest of society, and associated with them are partially converted libertarians and counter-economists. In order to reach this phase, the entire society has been contaminated by agorism to a degree. Thus, it is now possible for the first ghettos or districts of agorists to appear and count on the sympathy of the rest of society to restrain the state from a mass attack. These communities, whether above or below ground, can now sustain the New Libertarian Alliance. The New Libertarian Alliance acts as spokesman for the agora with the statist society, using every chance to publicize the superiority of agorist living to statists inhabiting and perhaps argue for tolerance of those with different ways. In this phase, the agorist society is vulnerable to statist regression of the populace. Thus, the agorists, whether visible or not, have a high incentive to at least maintain the present level of libertarian consciousness among the rest of the populace. This being done most expertly by the New Libertarian Alliance, one way to define who that alliance is at this phase. The New Libertarian Alliance has its sustenance and its mission. But in addition to defending the agorist subsociety, it can work towards accelerating the next evolutionary step. Phase 3. High-density, large condensation agorist society. In this phase, the state moves into a series of terminal crises, somewhat analogous to the well-known Marxist scenario, but with different causes, in this case, real ones. Fortunately, the potential for damage has been drastically decreased by the sapping of the state's resources and corrosion of its authority by the growth of the counter-economy. In fact, as the resources of the economy approach equality between the state and the agora, the state is pushed into crisis. Wars and rampant inflation with depressions and crack-ups become perpetual as the state attempts to redeem its authority. It may be possible to reverse its decline by corrupting the agora with deductive anti-principles, so the New Libertarian Alliance's first task is clear: to maintain vigilance and purity of thought. In this phase, the New Libertarian Alliance may no longer hold either label or much of its old form. The most motivated New Libertarians will move into the research and development supply for the budding agorist protection and arbitration agencies, and lastly as directors of the protection company syndicates. The situation now approaches revolution, but is still reversible. Again, the New Libertarians are in the forefront of maintaining and defending gains to this point, but looking ahead to the next phase. The New Libertarian Alliance, now just a collective term for the most forward-looking elements, can accelerate the process by discovering and developing the optimal methods of protection and defense, both by word and deed, for their industry, and entrepreneuring its innovations. At this phase transition between 3 and 4, we have the last unleashing of violence by the ruling class of the state to suppress those elements that would bring them to justice for all past state crimes. The state's intellectuals perceive that its authority has failed and all will be lost. Things must be reversed now or ever, or never. The New Libertarian Alliance must prevent premature awareness of this status or premature action on this awareness. This is the final strategic goal of the New Libertarian Alliance. When the state unleashes its final wave of suppression and is successfully resisted, this is the definition of revolution. Once realization has occurred that the state no longer can plunder and pay off its parasitical class, the enforcers will switch sides to those better able to pay them, and the state will rapidly implode into a series of pockets of statism in backward areas, if any. Phase 4. Agorist society with statist impurities. The collapse of the state leaves only mopping up operations. Since the insurance and protection companies see no state to defend against, the syndicate of allied protectors collapses into competition, and the New Libertarian Alliance, its support gone, dissolves. Statists apprehended pay restitution, and if they live long enough to discharge their debts, are reintegrated as productive entrepreneurs, their training coming automatically as they work off their debt. And we are home, as in Chapter 2. New libertarianism is taken for granted as the basis of ordinary life, and we tackle the other problems facing mankind.